Thank you. You will now be placed into conference. To mute your line, press *6. To unmute, press #6.
Right information that we mentioned on the Training 3 webinar. So you'll see here from the table of contents that we're going to go into depth with understanding the copyright and then applying it to materials you might find, and then a few tips and hints on obtaining permission for copyright. So first, let's look at some tips for identifying the license. We're going to take a look at where you can find it, and then there's been a few changes with Creative Commons, and so we'll just clarify that, and then point out a few things to be careful on. This really is the easiest place, just like in a book, to find license information. It's most likely at the beginning of the document or at the end. So you begin by checking the first few pages and then the last few pages. If you cannot find any license information on the material itself, then check the website. Some websites include a license for their materials on the bottom of the front page. But if the license information is not on the document and it's not right there at the bottom of the website, the next place to check on the website would be the Terms of Use or About Us section. Here's a chart that we think would be really helpful to clarify the Creative Commons. It shows you the licenses. The thing to remember is that there are 6 different Creative Commons licenses. If you look down under license name, that first column on the table. But only 2 are approved, meaning you do not need a copyright clearance form if your material comes under just a Creative Commons attribution with the BY after it, or Creative Commons attribution no derivatives, which means no derivatives, and that's the BYND. If you look all the way to the right on the chart, that tells you you don't need the copyright clearance form. Make sure you also take a look at the abbreviations on the graphic. A lot of this looks very similar. Just because you see a CC in a circle doesn't mean you automatically can assume that it is a copyright clearance form is not necessary, because they all start out Creative Commons attribution. You all will have copies of this entire webinar as well as the chart in it. The copyright clearance form and a sample email when requesting copyright, it's all on the wiki. One of the things we want to read, speaking of wikis, one of the things we want you to be careful about is when you find materials that are on Wikispaces. Now, most wikis are licensed under the Creative Commons attribution share alike. So if they are, with the SA at the end, resources would need a clearance form. You can tell if it's a Wikispace, of course, by the web address. You'll see Wikispaces included right there. Sometimes the website will have a different copyright license than the actual document from the website. So make sure to always check the document that you were pulling off. This example shows a Creative Commons attribution license on the website, but a Creative Commons non-commercial license on the document. That's all the way to the right, and you'll see it says BYNC. In that case, you will need a copyright clearance form for the document if you choose to use that. And always, when in doubt, ask for permission. Now let's work on applying some copyright understanding. The number one thing when you're getting ready to compile or submit your resource is you want to identify the license. You want to make sure, if it was required, you have the copyright clearance form signed by the owner of the resource, or it is a Creative Commons attribution, or it is a Creative Commons attribution with no derivative. If it's public domain, that means it's free of copyright restrictions, and that's okay to put up. Also, in Smarter Balance terms of service, if it is owned by the contributor, like if it is something you created yourself. And then, of course, the ones that have the blanket license, if it's something from the sites YouTube, TeacherTube, SchoolTube, SlideShare, Vimeo. And then if you're using the new arrangement with Mars, you want to make sure that you have followed that procedure carefully, and that was explained in training 3. So if you have your number 1, identified the license, and you have what you need there, what's your next step? Then go ahead and write the cover profile. Now here are a few examples. We have 4 resources, and you can tell if you look at A that it gives us a public domain graphic. Now you won't always see this graphic. Public domain means it is okay to use without a clearance form. Sometimes you'll have to read that really small text that is at the bottom of the document or the website. And if you look at B, you can see that the Creative Commons license with BY means that there's no form needed also, but it really was lost at the bottom of the document with some other information. And C, of course, is a really easy to read one, and that is a Creative Commons by BY, but with ND, which means no derivatives. And then D, of course, that one is obvious. That's the copyright with the 1C in the circle. That person, Doug, owns the rights to this information. So let's go over that again. Let's identify the license. For A, that was a public domain. Your next step would be just go right ahead and write the cover profile. B, that was a Creative Commons attribution. And with that one, again, no copyright clearance forms necessary. Just go right ahead and write the cover profile. With C, the Creative Commons attribution said no derivatives. That is also one that is not required to have a copyright clearance form, so you can go ahead and write the cover profile. But D, the one we saw with the copyright by Doug, would need the copyright clearance form. And we recommend that you get the copyright clearance before you go any further. So now let's talk about some tips for getting permission with the copyright clearance form. We know this is a time-consuming step. Once you have located who you need to get permission from, who needs to complete the form for you, you could send an email, and you could follow that up with a phone call. You want to think about the questions you may be asked and be ready with your information. And then we have some tips to tell you, plus some other guidance regarding copyright. You're going to find the contact information, of course, on the document. And you'll also probably find the email and phone numbers there. If it's a larger company organization, though, check the website. And, of course, just like we mentioned earlier, check the About Us, Contact Us, or Terms of Use parts of that website. If it's an individual and you can't find them, you can search their name in Google. We have been very successful in doing that. And in one instance, we searched the names of the 2 teachers, and we found out they had both retired. But we could track down what district they used to work for. Sometimes it's a little bit like being a detective. So once you have the contact information, your email can go to that person or company, and right within the digital library, you will find a suggested email text that is outlined here in red on the screen. That text of the email is also on our wiki, And it gives you a lot of background information to help you answer questions. Now, if you've emailed and you did a follow-up call and you haven't received the form via email within 2 weeks, it's okay, make another phone call. This time you might ask to speak with someone regarding copyright permission. Now, it's different depending on the company. It might be the contracts, grants, and permissions department. It might be the legal department. It might be the communications. Much of it depends on how big the company is, and you'll probably need to ask around before you get to the right person. So questions you may be asked is they might say, well, what is this digital library? Tell me more. You can use the background information that is in the sample email to answer many of the questions. So I want to know your connection to Smarter Balance, and just explain that you are a state network educator and you are helping to construct this digital library. They're going to say, can I make edits to the copyright clearance form? No, they cannot. It is a legal document. No company, individual, or other organization can change the form in any way. And will Smarter Balance be making a profit? That is a good question. The third paragraph, right, of the suggested email text, it's right in there that tells you that this will be part of a state's contract for the Smarter Balance assessment. Always refer to the suggested email. Now, here's some other tips on getting permission. Keep your phone calls short and connect primarily to connect with the right person. And then, even if you get to the right person, keep it short and send them the text of the sample email as you edit to fit the situation. But send that text to them via email so they have it in writing. It's a great guide. And be patient. You could be sent on a wild goose chase, and we know many of you have. And so maybe this just isn't the resource to use. You could be persistent if you really feel that this is important. You can move on to a different resource. You can keep calling while you're working on a different resource and see if you can reach your goal on that. But eventually, you may need to just reject this resource and move on. And some ways around it, for instance, we had a teacher who wanted to include an entire poem. Well, if she cannot get permission from the poet to include the poem, you could talk about the poem and include the link to that poet's website within your document. The link itself cannot be the entire resource, but you could refer to it rather than having the entire poem written out in your resource. Other things regarding copyright? When you're conducting a gatekeeping or a quality criteria review, remember, you do not need to check the license. At this point, once the resource is submitted, we are assuming that the submitter, the person who uploaded it to the digital library, did their due diligence and followed copyright law correctly. If a resource is posted to the library and you see that it may, or you believe that it may violate the copyright laws, that's the time to flag it. And there will be people who are working with the Smarter Balance Committee who will take a look at that. If something is found to have violated copyright in any way, the post will be removed, the resource will be removed. Well, thank you very much for learning a little bit more about copyright. And of course, every instance and every resource is different. If you have individual questions, please feel free to call me or email me anytime. And of course, contact the Smarter Balance Help Desk, the Amplify Help Desk, at this number or email, and they are always there to help too. Thanks.